Most of you believe in your own mind that you're pretty sharp, pretty intelligent. And if I would ask you a simple question to our mothers, to our deacons and ministers, if I didn't acknowledge it to all of you, if I would ask you one simple question: how many of you are experts in everything? Now we know we got some that thank you so much, Deacon, that think they, y'all ever been around some of them? That think they are experts in everything. But how many of you are experts in every area, every thought, every conversation, every desire, every need? You're experts in everything. Anybody over here? Anybody over here? Don't y'all have to look over there, I'm gonna ask you. Any of y'all experts on everything? Anybody over here experts in every? Balcony, I should have got, at least somebody got brain. Well, since none of us are experts in everything, because of this, we seek help or advice from many different sources when we are ready or we are faced with what we believe are critical decisions in our lives. Have any of you ever sought advice from a loved one? Y'all scared to raise your hand? I ain't shaking myself. We seek advice or direction from, we don't just go to anyone. We go to someone we trust or we believe who will direct us, helping us make the correct decision. We get advice on our health, we get advice on what to buy, get advice on our education, even the job market, and et cetera, et cetera. Even sometimes we ask, and don't ask God, but we ask everybody else, what do you think about that boy or girl? You think they'll make a good wife or a good husband? Anybody here with me? And if your money is like mine and most of us, not like some of these other folks that's got an endless bank account, we try to get what's best for the money we have to spend. We ask friends and we get second opinions. And because we are concerned about getting the best value we can, we test out different products. And now, many of us, because sometimes our money is limited, we don't check out the consumer report. But we can check the consumer report and it will give us supposedly an unbiased decision or unbiased advice on what's the best. But because sometimes we can't get the best, we don't have to look. And what's the best, we just look what's best for the money. Anybody here for me? You know, we don't worry about what's the number one car, because I might not buy the number one car. But we do get advice on what's the best for my money. But the consumer report services is a service that serves consumers or customers through an unbiased product testing and rating. It's research, it's journalism, it's public education that it helps us to be able to make the best decisions on what we are not clear on ourselves. Some use the consumer report and some don't. But we know that it can be of great value. And so why is it there? Simple It's there because we are bombarded with an onslaught of advertisement, opinions, and options. You know, even when you go to have surgery, they say, well, you can do this. And anybody deal with me? It ain't just you need this. They say, well, you can get this. When I had my wisdom teeth cut out, I said teeth. They said, you can get both or all at one time. All of them not bad, but they probably will be bad. So you know you got options. So we have options, and because of advertisement, and what I found out is that everyone believes their product is the best. Reverend Hughes up here sell cars, and he's not going to tell you, since he's over there with the Hondas, that the other car is the best, right? Now, some of y'all might think it's the best, and so they tell you, so you get caught in between what's the best for what I got. But even in our spiritual lives, we face many challenges or decisions of who should we serve, who should we worship, who should be our God. And I know many of you saying that's not true, but in our homes, some of your homes and places of work, we know that some say they serve God, but their actions don't show. Some don't even acknowledge they serve God anymore. A young lady called on WLOK the other day, and she said, I've been in church, I've been and I went and I was taken, but I just can't believe in that God. And so that's situations that we face, because they're saying now that 20 to 25% of the young people under 35 is all that's in church or in somebody's serving some God. So there are many that's not Christians now. And if you don't believe that, check out what's taking place in Memphis on April the 2nd through the 5th. American Atheist National Convention will be held in Memphis on those dates at the Peabody Hotel. And many are turning to other religions. I had some mothers, one talked to me a few years ago and said, you know what to do, that son sent a letter and said, I'm no longer a Christian. I'm now a Muslim. And so don't think that it's not prevalent and it's not present. We have called them, these other religions, false gods or serving idols. And this is what was happening in Israel as our text pick up. Some had started to serve and worship the gods of those who had them in bondage. And we just, as we look back, and God was dealing with them in this 46th chapter, but really, if you go back and really read and study the book of Isaiah, in chapter 40 through 66, God, through Isaiah, was telling them that he was going to be delivered and it was going to be a time of restoration. But God told them also, but some things had to change. And one was those idols that they were now worshiping. They had to stop. And so he deals really now with us not following him or putting others before him. If you would ask the question, and I know you're saying that's not true, but look at the United States now. Look at where she was and look at where she is right now. Anytime you go against what God is saying, you become your own God. And so we said that what's happening in your home? Why did everyone in the last month at your home, did they at least stop at somebody's church? Did they stop at somebody's Bible study? Did they at least watch somebody's church service on TV? That ought to let you know that lets us know that everyone is not a Christian. Some are talking it, but they are not walking it. And so on today, we want to look just at a few moments. And God addresses this need to look at what God we should be serving. And he said we should be serving the capital G-O-D and not the little G-O-D, God. And so the problem is because there's so many gods that's being presented out there. They are confused, and because they are confused, you see in the results raping and murder, and I know it's always been there, but now it seems like everywhere you turn, they're killing each other on every street. But in order for us to get a good report, we may need to get, or maybe make a wise decision, we may need to get a consumer's report. And we need an investigation. Because some of us might not, and I said might not, because some of you should already know. You should need an investigation. How many of you have heard, if you're in the Memphis area, most of you have probably heard of Andy Wise. Andy Wise is a new broadcaster for Action 5 News, where he works in the Consumers Investigation Unit. Andy Wise, y'all heard of him? He produced Andy Will It Work? And this is where he tests products, advertising claims, and launches consumer advice segment. Ask Andy. Well, sadly, some of you have been asking Andy questions he could not handle. And before you buy, they said, ask Andy. But I need to let you know on today, Andy can't handle, I don't believe, the question I need asking. And so let's listen to someone who knows all that need to be investigated, but he does not need to do an investigation. Let me put it this way again, you ain't caught it. He knows all that needs to be investigated, but he does not need to do an investigation. But why does he not need to do an investigation? Because he already knows what's going to happen. He already knows what has happened, and he already knows what will happen. Now let's see what, if I did not identify him, his name is Jehovah Jireh. He is God Almighty. If I didn't identify him, and God is saying to us that in this report, God is saying what God has to say. We need to see what God has to say about himself and these other little G-O-D-S's. That way should help us make a wise decision. Because I remember most of us go to people for advice so we can make a sound and correct decision. I know some of you saying, Rev, that does not sound good, because usually when we get a report, we don't want a report that's coming from the person reporting on himself, because when they do, that's kind of like what happened when the police investigate themselves. Anybody in here but me? Well, I can't argue that point too much, but when it comes to God, God will not be biased, but God has the data, and the data, he has the fact, and he has all of it about himself, and also about these other little G-O-D-S. And we must understand in this chapter, again, 46, that it really takes us back to chapter 40 and all the way to 46 right now. So God said, bring your gods and present their case. Because remember, even Andy Wise can't give you a report till he tests the product. And so God said, bring your little G-O-D-S's and see if they stand up against me. Maybe you're making the wrong decision. And you need to be able to take the report to your homes. Need to be able to take the report to your community. For that many that we know, if we be honest, are not serving a living God. So it says, first point, God says to us, what can your gods do? I like that. What do they have to offer? That's a pretty good question, isn't it? You know, they're going to be our gods. We all don't know what they have to offer. Isn't that a question you ask, Ricky, when you sign up to work? What kind of benefits you got? What you paying, Carl? You know, that's those some of the questions we ask. We want to know what they offered with you. What kind? Do we have a retirement? What have you got to offer, Mercer? So we can know how to plan. So God said, what can your gods do? And in other words, what can they offer you? Since you're turning your back on me, maybe they're offering you something that I don't know about. And so listen to what God says about them in verse 6 and 7. Y'all got your eyes on it? And he said, they lavish, now catch this, y'all. He said they lavish gold out of the bag. That's the people, that's not the God. That's the people, that's us. That's us that have chosen these little gods. Look at what he said, that weigh silver in the balance and how goldsmith. Look at what he goes on and said, and make it a God. In other words, that don't even sound right. Because what it says is that the God that you're making is only what you can afford. Isn't that what it says? Look at it again. Well, it goes a little further than that. It said they only make what you tell them to make. Your God look like what you want them to look like. And you know what I found out? I don't need a God only know what I know. I need somebody that knows something that I don't know. I need somebody to do something I cannot do. Help me out, Holy Spirit. Do you remember Peter when they was at the temple, don't you? And said that man came down and was lame. They didn't have silver and gold. If they had that, they could have gave it and said molded it to a God. But they gave him something you couldn't get from silver. Anybody here with me? He said, you have goldsmith and you make it out of a God. And he said, go on to say, and you fall down and you worship him. But look at what he says about it. Really, God, in a kind of mild manner, began to play with him. Really began to make fun of him. Because look at what he said. You bear him up on the shoulder. They carried him and set him in his place. In other words, if when you set him, guess where he's going to be? And y'all got it. He's going to be there when you go back. He's going to be there in the same place. But he said that, remember when they wanted to make God a temple and they wanted to make God a place of worship, and God said, well, I can't be confined because I'm over here and I'm also over there. I'm in the back. They used to sing a song said, I'm in the back, I'm in the front, I'm on the left, I'm on the right, I'm everywhere. Anybody know he's there? Thank be to God he's there. For sometimes problems happen on my right, sometimes it happen on my left, but wherever I need it, he's always there. And I don't have to worry about can I make it back to New Bethel. New Bethel is a good place, but if he had only been at New Bethel, I never would have found him on Lake Grove at the age of 9 and almost 10. But God is. You don't have to worry about us moving around. But God went on to say that he began to kind of mock y'all, because he said that the gods that y'all got, you have to set them in one place. And you know what I found out? He said they got ears, but you can call them. Tell them you need them down at Methodist Hospital. But they can't come down to Methodist. Well, you tell them you need them at Baptist. Maybe they can make it down there. He said the problem is that you got to communicate to make sure that, see, I can't go down to Methodist to see Reverend Campbell if I didn't know he was at Methodist. But somebody told me, so I heard the message, but if I couldn't hear, and they didn't write it down, and I got a problem if I can't see. So if I can't hear and I can't see, I can't get the message. That you need me. Now God says that because you can't hear, you can't see, you can't answer me when I need you. So that's what he said. He said in the text, y'all, he said they cried unto him. He said they whispered. He said they cried. And even when they cried, you remember when Ezekiel was married, not Ezekiel, Isaiah was married, not Isaiah, the prophet, it's Elijah. Thank you so much. Remember when he had a battle with Baal gods, and God said, and Baal, he said, well, maybe the gods are a little bit deaf, you know. And every now and then I said, well, maybe what happened is they took the wrong messenger, you know, they had gone into a deep sleep, man. So he said, Elijah said, well, tell you what you might need to do, you know, they're in a deep sleep, and so when they real sleepy, you might need to holler a little bit louder. And so you know what he said, and y'all ever taken in a NyQuil, and you take that old medicine and you remember, oh Lord, I got something to do, and you got. So maybe that's what happened to him. So he told him, maybe you need to holler a little louder. And so God said, you don't have to worry about that. He said, for they already cried unto him, but yet can he not answer. And so the problem is, since he can't answer, he can't save you when you're in trouble. And so he said, you make them look like, but they can't hear. And so God went on, and God didn't bite his tongue, because listen to what God says in verse 2. He said that both the idols and their owners are bowed down. And he says that not only they bow down, I'm reading from the New Living Translation, the gods cannot protect the people, and the people cannot. So you just throw your money away for nothing. And really he was telling them that because it looked like Babylon was coming out ahead right now. But God would tell them in due time, these little gods, and God did not just call them out, he told them who they were. In verse 1, he called them by name. He called them Baal, and he said Nebo, and he said that now Baal was also called Merodach, and that's in Jeremiah 50 and the second verse. And Nebo was the son of Baal. And so really God was making fun of them, because in this is my just saying, he didn't say it was in the scripture, but because he really goes on and talks about them, as he said that they are images, but they can't move. He said when they get from one place to the next, you got to carry them. Is that what he said? He said you got to carry them. And really that's what he said in verse 1 and 2. You got to carry them from one place. So if you want to come and worship him, you got to get him from New Bethel to Lake Road. Otherwise you can't worship him. And so he said that y'all put them in a cart. And you got to understand really this part of their history, because it said that on Babylon's New Year's Day festival, they would load them up and they would march them around the city, or carry them around the city. And so he said that, well, in other words, you can't do nothing if you don't load them up. And then he said the animals are put in a burden because of the heavy weight. And so he said a person, and what I need to let you know is that many of us are loaded down with the idols that we're serving. Because an idol is whatever received the primary devotion and commitment of that person's heart. Whatever consumed that person's life. And you're going to talk about, well, I know without a doubt. God is the head. We say it like this. God is the head of first giving honor. God who's the head of my life. And when did you talk to him last? I'm just asking a personal question. I'm just asking you. You don't have to tell me. That's between you and God, because you know, remember, God knows it all. So if you lie like you talked to him this morning, and some of you hadn't talked to him, it's probably not you. But this is why it's so important that we understand that many of our people are not talking to God. We see the results. And so, as God says, that the first point he says is that he asked them, what can your God do? What do they have to offer? And it didn't look like they had too much to offer. Your car that you making your God, that you spend all your hard-earned money, you only get what you can pay for. Yeah. And you find out how many of y'all have bought a new car. Don't raise your hand. I don't want some of you might not ever bought a new car. Well, if you bought a new car, guess what? In the due time, you want another one. And if you've been blessed to build a house or buy a house, and the wife be all so happy over it. We love, God blessed us to build our house in 87, 89. She was all happy, then a few years later, it needs remodeling. So see, if you're going to praise them things too much, you're going to be won't know about changing God. Let me go on down. Second thing is, God says, second point is, we need to get out of here. God says, check, since you check them out, now check me out. And I didn't do this first because we had got on this. And if you ever was looking and Jerry tried to get you over and to look at their cars, because I bought 3 of them old Hondas, and they get you to looking at them, and they want to try to sell you, because they don't want you to go look at nobody else. Because they know there's other cars that might have something else to offer. But when you find really what you want, you don't have to go nowhere else, right? And so if we had to deal with checking God out, we never would have got to look at that car. When God got all these great attributes, I would have been sold right then. I wouldn't have had to go look at another car. So first point is, God said, look at verse 8 and 9. We're going to try to bid y'all farewell in a few minutes, but we got to finish this, because we got so many of our our loved ones in our home, in our community, that folk we don't want to acknowledge, but they are not serving no gods. They're not serving God, rather. They are serving God. They're serving the drugs. They're serving prostitution. They're serving something else besides God. And verse 8, y'all got your eye on it? And God says, and check me out. Listen to what he says first. Remember this and show yourself me and bring it again to mind. Old transgressors, he called them sinners. Listen to what he said. Remember the former things of old. Not just to them, to us. Listen to what he says. For I am God, and there is none. Is that in your Bible? I am God, and there is none like me. If you didn't catch it the first time, you repeated it the second time. And so God said, remember the former things of old. And to remember, God kind of had already given them what he wanted them to, partly what he wanted them to remember in verses 3 and 4. Let's fast forward. Let's fast up to verse 3. Go back up to verse 3 and 4. Listen, I'm going to read it from the New Living Translation. I told you we're going to deal with the first, they took the 10th verse. He said, listen to me, descendants of Jacob. I'm reading from the New Living Translation. All you who remain in Israel, I have cared for you since you were born. Now tell your neighbor, that means me. Because God has cared for me from my birth. If you don't believe me, ask him to take away his breath for 5 or 10 seconds and see what you'll do. So it's God who's keeping you and not you keeping yourself. And so then he goes on down to say, I carried you before you were born. And he said, I will be your God throughout your lifetime. Until your hair is white with age, I made you and I will care for you and I will carry you along and save you. And so God told Israel, and he wants us to do. And we try to help those, because I hope it's not us, make a decision that we should be serving God and not these idols that our mind make. Because remember, the idols is really something that you make in your own mind. But it's only as far as your mind can see. Because remember, they made the gods in their image. And so it's something you form. And the problem is when you form it, that's all you can expect out of it, is what you form. And so he goes on to say that not only what he had done for Israel, but he tells Israel, unlike the gods of Babylonia, he said, I carried you from birth. I've been with you. And he says that I will continue to do it in the future. Listen to what he had already done. He had already told them some of the things that he's already done. For chapter 45, verse 12. I'm going to read you a few verses and then we'll go down to the third part. He said, I have made the earth and created man upon it. Even my hands have stretched out the heavens, and all their hosts have I commanded. Can your gods do that? The little gods. Chapter 44, verse 6, he said, Thus saith the Lord, the King of Israel, and his Redeemer, the Lord of hosts, I am the first, and I am the last. And beside me there is no God. And God also said his counsel will stand forever. Look at verse 10. He said, declaring the end from the beginning. And I like this. I just got stuck on that. I just really got almost put in awe of that. Listen to what he said, declaring the end from the beginning. How many of you could tell me from the beginning where you were going to be right now? And that's not even the end. We said all the time, if I knew this was going to happen, I would have done different. And that's not even the end. But listen to what God said. He said, declaring the end from the beginning. Why can he do that? Because there is no ending with him. He is Alpha and he is Omega. He is the beginning and the end. And because he knows all and he sees all, he can declare the beginning from the beginning. He can declare the end. In other words, from the beginning, I didn't even know my name. From the beginning, I didn't know if I was a boy or girl. From the beginning, I didn't know my mom or my dad. You didn't either. From the beginning, how many of you knew? Matter of fact, if they hadn't told you your name was so-and-so, you'd think it's somebody else. If they didn't tell you that you were born over there, you would not know where you were born because you didn't know the ending. Matter of fact, you didn't even know the middle. But God says he knows the beginning. He declared the end from the beginning. And from ancient times, the things that are not yet to be done. See, I like that. And so what he tells us is we ought to get happy about that. Is God already knows what's going to happen. And not only does he know what happened, he's already told us what we can expect. That's why we get excited about that 14th chapter of John when he said, in my Father's house are. Y'all know that one, don't you? Because you're looking for that house. But you got to do something on this side to make sure you get to that other house. And he said, my counsel, from ancient times that are not yet done, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. In other words, he's going to do whatever he pleases. Do y'all know anybody can do whatever they please? You can own your own company, you can't do what you please. I've been married 40 years and I can do whatever I please in that house over there. Y'all with me? Don't y'all laugh. Y'all just like me. If you've been married, you can't do whatever you please. And if you're not married, you can't do whatever you please because you get tired of paying taxes, but you got to pay it or you can't. Y'all with me? In other words, nobody can do what they please because we don't have the power. And so God said no one can stop it. The good news about God is that his counsel lasts forever. Psalm 33:11 says, the counsel of the Lord standeth forever, the thoughts of his heart to all generations. And God gives not only Israel the assurance that he would be with them, but he also gives us that same assurance. Yes, sir. If we look back at what he's already done, we could joy in knowing that if he's already done it, he can continue to do it. Yes, so no matter what comes our way, God gives us the assurance. And Jesus said it's like this. He said that I already got you covered. He said in the last verse in the Gospel of Matthew, the last verse in the Gospel of Matthew, that 28th chapter, verse 20, he said, I am with you always, even until the end of the world. What an awesome God. Tell your neighbor, what a God. Is he your God? And so God said, and this is the final report. Y'all ready for it? Come on, sir. He said, I asked you to present your little gods. What did they have to offer? Nobody got bold and raised their hand. So God said, then I just showed you a little bit about me, that I created the heaven and the earth. I know about the beginning before there was an end. I knew the end before there was a beginning. You figured out. In other words, he knew everything. And he said, but I just told you a little bit about myself. I got you covered. And he said, but still some of you wondering, do you need to be on my side? But he said that the last point is, and I want to just put this. He said, I know you thought I forgot verse 5, but the third point is to tell your neighbor, no God, no gods, no gods can be compared to me. None, nothing is in my class. Listen to verse 5, and we're going to bid you farewell. I know y'all thought I had forgot it, but if we had dealt with verse 5, we never would have got nowhere else. Because verse 5 said, y'all got your eyes on it? Listen at it. It said, to whom will you liken me? And make me. Either you got to bring them up or you got to bring me down. You can't bring me down because I'm Alpha and Omega. I'm all powerful. But the problem is you can't bring them up because their power is limited. And so Hugh said it is limited. And so he goes on to say, and compare me that we may be like. How can you compare gold, something dead, that let me put it this way. How can you compare something that you take to the, some of y'all have to go melt it down and shape it into whatever you want to shape it. How can you form it into something that you're made like in the image of? That you don't even really know exactly how he looks. Nobody ever seen God. So how can you form? How can you be like him? And so he said that how can they be like, that they may be like me? How many can think like God? How many minds can be omnipotent, omnipotent? How many can be like God? And God said that this to Israel, but he had already said it not just now. He had said it over and over because he wants us to understand there is nobody like him. Chapter 40, I won't read both of them, but I want you to write these down. Chapter 40, verse 18, and chapter 25, in verse 25, I'm going to read verse 18. To whom then will ye liken being God? To whom will then, let me reread. To whom then will ye liken God? Or what likeness will you compare unto him? There's nobody. But we get fooled every day by this false advertising, this trickery that their gods can do what God can do. God cannot be compared to anyone or anything. He knows everything. He even knows the number of stars in the sky. But not only does he know them, and it's over 1 billion by what we estimate, but God has given them all name. Psalm 147:4. He created the heaven and the earth, the people that's in it, and God knows all. John 1:3 said, all things that were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. Tell your neighbor that means your little G-O-D. Because he gave you the mind and you formed them in your mind, so he already knew. And the problem is that you think that the little G-O-D, that the mind that he gave you to make is greater than him. That does not work. You're not greater than the Creator. And so what he's saying to us is that you don't have to worry about me being a piece of wood or a piece of metal or something that you formed in your mind being greater than me, because he said they're all dead and I am alive. Yes, I'm not like the gold. I made the gold. I'm not like the wood that can be destroyed by fire. He said gold has to be put in the fire to be purified. He said there's no fault in me. There's no sin in me. I am clean. And so what he says to that, and so God's statement to us, like he said to Israel, is that no one, and put all nothing is in my class. Listen to what Paul said about it. And Paul, I think, helped us figure it out, because Paul said in Ephesians 3:20, now to him that's able to do exceedingly, abundantly, above all that we can. Now, how many of y'all can answer a whole lot of stuff? But see, this really what get me, because he really lets you know that your God's not even on his level, because he said that you can even ask or think. And if you can't think it, your God can't even make it. Your God can't even do it. Because remember, he said that the God that you're really serving is God that you made up in your mind. What you want them to do, but they can't do it. And that's why he come back running to God. And so God says to us, no one can save you from eternal doom but me. And so he said, had it written in Isaiah the 45th chapter, 27th verse, and I'm ready to leave you with it. He said, look unto me and be saved, all the ends of the earth, for I am God, and there is none else. And all he's trying to say to us, if you think this world is tough, if you don't accept the true and living God, the place that you're going is much worse than this. And no one can save you from eternal doom but me. The only way you can get it is you got to accept me as accept Jesus as your personal Savior, the one who was crucified on Calvary, put in a borrowed grave. But the good news is, because he had all power, tell your neighbor, he had all power, not like your little G-O-D that could not move. Tell your neighbor, the rock moved because of his power. That's some kind of power, isn't it? And the rock got out of a rock, and the rock sat on top of a rock. Who is that rock? He is Jesus, our Savior. Our lily of the valley, our bright and morning star. Anybody know it? You ought to tell him thank you for what he's done. You ought to tell him not only thank you for what he's done, but tell him thank you for what he's going to do, what he's going to do. He has power to save, power to heal, power to give eternal life, power to solve all our problems. And tell your neighbor, there is no one like him. No one in his class. In other words, if you don't believe me, we can predict, but God declared. Anybody else? You ought to tell God thank you. We predict, but God declared. God don't have to predict. What God says come to be. And we just praise and bless God's holy name for who he is and what he done. We wait for the verdict, but God already. Anybody know he does? You ought to tell God thank you. God, we wait for the verdict, but God already has the verdict. Anybody in here still gonna trust in them little G-O-D? I don't know about you, but I want a God that knows more than I know. I want a God that's bigger than me. I want a God that's more powerful than me. I want a God that's thought is far above my thought. Because sometimes, if we be honest, what we thought was little. But God have elevated us, some of us, much further than we ever imagine in our life, because his thoughts and his ways are far above our ways. Tell your neighbor, there ain't no God in the class of God.